Hi out there, this is Cynthia Howard, and welcome to this episode of Freedom Cast. Today is Monday, March 7th, 2022, and I'm coming to you from the Live Free or Die state of New Hampshire, where most of all, the COVID restrictions have been lifted. We're very thankful for that. I, as well as my husband, have been COVID survivors since December, and we are left with some of the side effects. But we are a lot better than we were when we were sick. And yeah, maybe I should have worn my mask more often. Maybe I should have gotten the vaccine. But you know what I can tell you is I know people firsthand who did get the shot, as well as all the boosters, and that did wear their mask when they were out in public, and they still were as sick as I was. So there's really nothing to pinpoint who's going to get sick or who's not, or what they should do to prevent it. It's based on probably your DNA and your blood type, family history. So we don't know how your body's going to react. We just know that you have to do the best you can to keep your immune system built up and exercise and try to keep your weight under control and just try to eat healthy. And you may still get it, and you just got to try to fight very hard to get well again. But we're on the mend, and I send out my prayers to people I know in my community of Claremont here who weren't as fortunate, who passed on from the virus. I pray for their families every day, and God bless them. But today on this episode of Freedom Cast, I'm going to talk to you about the driving force of property taxes, which is mainly the school tax, which makes up more than half of our budget locally in this town, as well as statewide. You know, school spending is through the roof. And yeah, there are disparities in funding. We're in a poor district, which doesn't get as much funding as richer communities, but still, you can have a lot of money, and it depends on how you spend it, if you spend it wisely, or do you create more positions, you know, especially collective bargaining / union positions, which will even drive the tax rate even higher, because you've got those union contracts that last maybe 2 or 3 years, and each year it goes up even when you don't vote on it, because it's the second or third year of the contract. Well, usually that's the case. And such was the case recently at the deliberative session in my hometown of Claremont, where I thought things were on the mend. We have a very conservative school board. The majority of them are very conservative with our tax dollars, and they voted to reduce the operating budget by $150,000 by reducing a couple of positions, bureaucratic positions in the tech center. Wow. There was a hullabaloo. I mean, there was a lot of information that was sort of slanting and biased in the newspaper, stating that, you know, programs were going to be cut and kids wouldn't be trained for jobs, and we need these jobs like plumbing and heating and electrical contractors. And kids need these. Well, they do. And I was upset when I read it. I thought, oh my goodness, they shouldn't cut that. That's so needed in this town. But then I dug a little deeper, and when I found out the real thing, I was really perturbed. And it had nothing to do with the kids or the programs. It had everything to do with the bureaucracy, the administrator, the director, and the guidance counselor. Those were the positions they were either reducing or cutting back on, which amounted to less than 1% of the school budget, around $150,000. And so I'm like, well, I'm glad it's happening. I'm glad they're doing something to do something very important in keeping our costs under control. And that's what the school board did. But a bunch of voters came out, according to the paper, voters pitch cash for tech center. That's what our local paper says. They are voters, but they're not the average taxpayer. There's what I call special interest voters. Special interest voters meaning they have an alliance with the school in some way, shape, or form, whether they're retired employees, current employees, family members of employees, friends and neighbors of the school district employees. They came out and made sure that went back in the budget. They put the $150,000 back in that budget to save face for the union, basically, to make sure they had enough voters on their end to make sure all these big budgets and these union contracts pass. So there's job security for them. It has nothing to do with the children or the programs, like they would have you believe. And they actually took their authority and said, we the people, how dare the school board do this? We the people don't want this. It is our will. Well, how can you call it the will of the people when there was less than 1% of the voters at the deliberative session? And again, they weren't your traditional voters. They were aligned with the school district, who were more concerned about preserving the union and preserving their job security contracts and helping out their friends. So when they need it on their end with their contracts, they will have the voting block there for them. So the money did go back in. So now the budget went up $150,000 to $37.3 million. So there will be a tax increase this year. And in addition to that, you have, which is not a coincidence really, you have the 4 union contracts that are on the ballot. The secretaries, the paraprofessionals, the maintenance workers, and the administrators. They're all on the budget. They're all on the warrant article for the vote tomorrow. So what happens is, if you vote yes on them, not only will they get their increase for the current budget cycle, but they'll get it because they're 2 or 3 year long contracts. So they'll get it for the second year, and they'll also get it for the third year. So when you vote for one thing, you're also getting a tax increase the second year and the third year on those contracts. And they don't really talk too much about that because they don't want you to know that you're going to be voting for something that's going to cost you in the long run, not now, but in the second and in the third year. So the unions are really big in the state of New Hampshire. The union that is the driving force of the school district is the National Education Association, which also includes not just teachers. It also includes maintenance workers and secretaries. Why they are part of the National Education Association, I have no idea. Only, let me see, I'll back that up again. So they have more of a voting block, and they build that union up to be the biggest in the country, which it is, by the way. It's the National Education Association Union is the biggest in the country, far bigger than the American Federation of Teachers, which is under the AFL-CIO, far bigger than the fire unions or the public workers unions, which are usually under AFL-CIO, and that's a big one, but nothing in comparison to the National Education Association. Now in New Hampshire we have 16,750 members of the NEA, National Education Association, and they're not only teachers, as I said, maintenance workers, secretaries, as well as retirees, as well as activists. So they're a growing group, and their budget is like $7 million a year. Now, the NEA National is based in Washington, and there are 3 million people that belong to that union. 3 million. And not only is it the largest in the country, but it's also the largest in the world, based in, I believe it's Brussels, Belgium. So that's what we, the taxpayers, are up against. These big unions, especially this one. This one is just out of control. And you can continue funding it, like the governor had sent us over $6.1 million a few years back for funding our school district. Guess what? The taxpayers got very little, and most of it went to more people in the school district, more programs. So very little comes back to us, even when they do get large sums of money. And it's very unfortunate that we're outnumbered by these union people. But people need to participate more and need to get out there during these deliberative sessions to stop it. But the second way you can stop it is by voting tomorrow Tuesday, March 8th, vote everything down and stand with the school district, because the school board, rather, because the school board has worked very hard to keep our taxes in check. And it's, I think, the first time in many, many years that we've had this conservative school board. And the school district is the largest employer in the city of Claremont, where we live, and that's the case in many places. But it is the largest employer. Is it any wonder why we have high property taxes? Now, not only is it the largest employer, but it also has a large union base. So we're going to get this COVID relief money again. We already got $1 million under Biden, who is already spent, or signed to spend $122 billion. That's a lot of money. And New Hampshire is going to get close to $500 million. They've gotten part of it already, and they're going to disperse that money to local districts. Well, it turns out that our district here in Claremont is going to get roughly $10.5 million for they call elementary and secondary emergency relief funds. But here we are, the pandemic. We're going out of the pandemic, and yet all they think about is spending on schools. And if you remember, months ago, here we had the National Guard in the schools teaching kids, and that worked out really well. We had kids on remote learning, known as virtual learning, and that worked out really well too. And the first teachers you have are your parents, and possibly now with all the technology that exists and everybody being on technology, it really is it isn't difficult to teach a child at home now in this day and age. But yet we continue to spend more and more money and get less results. Test scores aren't the best. And we keep building more buildings, or we keep adding to the buildings. We need this and we need that, and yet it's not solving the problem. It's not solving the education problems that exist with the children. They're not learning as well. They really aren't. So it's almost like we got to go through school choice, take a back seat, have the kids go back at home and learn with the parents, or learn remote learning may work in some cases to cut our cost, just to cut the cost down. So we don't have these bloated budgets and we have lower property taxes. Or streamline positions like the school board was doing. They're doing an awesome job. And give them a break. But no, we got to have people that are school district and either employees or connected to the school district, or local politicians that have an axe to grind to come in and start saying that the school board is doing a terrible job and we got to put that money back in. It's about the kids, it's about the programs, and it isn't anything to do with kids and programs. It's to do with keeping the education industrial complex, I call it, bureaucracy in place so that taxes remain high, budgets remain high, and that people aren't going to move in here because there won't be any jobs only at the school district. And who's funding the school district? The taxpayers. It's a small percentage of taxpayers that are funding these big budgets. And yeah, the state sends money, and yeah, the federal government sends money, but we have to pick up the slack. And as long as they keep the budgets up, we'll be picking up more of the slack year after year. So what you can do tomorrow is go out and vote. You've got to go out and vote and stand with the school board. This is unusual for me to say, but stand with the school board and vote no to reinstate that money and vote those union contracts down, because it's going to have an impact on your property taxes for years to come. Not just in the near future, but year after year. And so go out and vote like your taxes depend on it, because in actuality, they do depend on it. And I'm glad you listened to me today. And I'm on most social media. I'm still on Facebook, even though I've been censored. I'm on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. YouTube, of course. My email is cindycool09@yahoo.com. That's cindycool09@yahoo.com. My phone number is 603-543-1372. You can call me with any questions or get together and share some thoughts on these topics that I'm bringing to you. I'm also now on Getter, Jason Miller from the Trump campaign's site. It's a social media as well. So I urge you to check out Getter, Gettr, and I guarantee you won't be censored on whatever topic you talk about. It's a really good site, and I know former President Trump has got some coming up too, some social media platforms as well. I think it's called Truth. So that's in the works, so that if you're conservative and you support certain candidates, you won't be censored. And that's the way it should be. I may disagree with you, but I'll fight to the death so that you can say it, to paraphrase Voltaire, the French philosopher. So I hope to see you at the polls tomorrow, and hopefully we can get things under control, going in the direction to help the taxpayers with all this money coming into the district, the COVID relief funds, the elementary and secondary relief funds that are coming down the pike. A little bit under $10.5 million, because we've already gotten $1 million. So it's not about the money, people. It's not about the money. It's how they spend the money. It's preserving the union at taxpayers' expense. So you've got to get out and vote no tomorrow. Thank you for listening to me, and I'll be on again on one of these shows, and spread the word and share this video. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day.